Hi, I'm Tommy Thompson, this is AI in Games, and this is part 2 of the AI of Total War. In part 1 of this series, I looked at Creative Assembly's 2000 release Shogun Total War, a game that redefined real-time strategy games. Shogun defines 3 specific layers of AI systems: the unit AI that controls individual troops and keeps them in formation and on point, the combat AI that groups and sets formations to units, and the diplomacy AI that conducts the turn-based strategy seeking to take control of feudal Japan. I concluded part 1 with 2002's Medieval Total War, a game that refined and improved the core systems Shogun established. But this is just the beginning of a long journey improving and rebuilding the AI systems behind the franchise, both from within Creative Assembly itself, but also from the Total War fanbase. So let's look at the subsequent releases in the franchise and watch the evolution of war take place. Two 2004's Rome Total War brought both gameplay changes as well as a significant graphical overhaul. This third entry in the series brought a 3D diplomacy map as well as fully rendered 3D units to the franchise as it moved to 270 BC Italy, the birth of the Roman Empire. Rome Total War is one of the best ever reviewed PC strategy games. It's the entry that propelled the series from niche strategy sim to a full-blown blockbuster IP. However, it's also where some of the cracks were starting to show in the gameplay. This is most notable in the campaign segments, where the AI struggles to be as effective in this richer and more interesting set of diplomacy mechanics. In part, this can be attributed to the longer and more thoughtful progression of actions that are needed in order to build and scale your own corner of the Roman Empire. As mentioned in part 1, the diplomacy AI is state-based, with use of genetic algorithms often to provide some variety in respective AI players and their decision-making. Neither of these systems are ideal when you need to consider long-term decisions, given these approaches seldom consider the history of actions previously taken and the long-term ramifications. Despite these issues, it was still a valuable and fun entry in the series, and one that's developed a very strong fan following. Rome is also the beginning of a long and storied history of mods being built for Total War. This was relatively easy for a modder to accomplish, given that the earlier entries in the series left much of the data that drove gameplay exposed in the installation. As such, modders could then build tools that manipulated that data for their own purposes. Many of these mods aim to improve graphics and controls, expand the narrative, and create a richer world within which to play, such as Roma Surrectum and Rome Total Realism. Some even take the core mechanics in AI and transpose it to other worlds, such as the Fourth Age, a Tolkien mod, and ironically, the Warhammer Total War mod. Arguably the most impressive of these is Darth Mod, the first in a series of mods by Nick Tomadis, running from Rome Total War all the way to Total War Shogun 2 in 2011. Darth Mod not only tweaks the presentation and gameplay, but often makes significant changes to the parameters that influence the underlying combat and campaign AI behaviours, and gives more experienced players a run for their money, resulting in new combat formations, tweaked performance stats, and more resilient and aggressive AI behaviour. The underlying issues that arose courtesy of the revamp in Rome reached their peak with the release of Medieval II Total War in 2006. Medieval II is in essence a revamp of Medieval Total War in the Rome engine, but many of the underlying structural issues with the AI still held ground. But the thriving modding community largely made up for it. As such, it was time for a change. The AI systems needed to be rebuilt from the ground up, which is what happened with the release of Empire. While Rome was the revamp aimed at refreshing the core systems and gameplay, 2009's Empire Total War sought for loftier goals. A game aimed not only to innovate on the core formula of Total War, but also to make it more accessible to a larger audience. This led to a refresh of the UI systems, hints and tutorials, as well as core components of gameplay. Battle introduced a large variation of units that were reliant on gunpowder weaponry, such as cavalry, musketeers, riflemen, and heavy artillery, and in conjunction with this, a loose cover-based and navigation system was introduced for troops, allowing them to quickly scale small pieces of terrain and take cover during heavy fire. The largest addition to Empire is the transition to real-time naval combat, where players take command of a fleet of ships and attack opposing forces. In addition, the core campaign takes place across a much larger domain, with the American continents, Europe and India all prominent locations, not to mention the sea lanes that connect them. To make things even more complicated, by this point the campaign AI now needs to consider army and naval resource management, spatial analysis of the game map, recognise enemy threats on different terrains and configurations, conduct diplomacy, manage and allocate its resources, as well as work on construction, taxes and more. Undoubtedly, this led to a huge rise in the scope of the franchise, and with it came aspirations for improvements of the underlying tech. Empire completely rewrote the Rome Total War engine from the ground up, resulting not only in a new suite of AI implementations, but also some changes to how the game is delivered to users, which had a huge influence on the subsequent modding tools. Empire Total War rebuilt both the combat and campaign AI to migrate away from the purely reactive and state-driven behaviour, whereby the systems would largely respond in kind to decisions made by opposing players, but with their own flavour driven by specific configurations and parameters. For Empire, the focus was on bringing the AI to a point it could consider more long-term ramifications as well as balance multiple objectives at once. This led to the adoption of the goal-oriented action planning method, a technique popularised by First Encounter Assault Recon or FEAR and used in titles such as Fallout 3, Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl and Deus Ex Human Revolution. GOAP is a method of classical planning, whereby agents use an abstract model of the world in order to make a series of decisions that will transform the world to a desired outcome. It's ideal for situations where we have a number of individual actions in a sequence that we wish to complete and can reason over multiple objectives at the same time and execute actions accordingly to address them, provided they don't conflict with one another. Many of the original tactics from Shogun could transfer here quite easily, given that the art of war logic could easily be encoded into a planning style language for search and execution. If you want to know more about AI planning and how it works, be sure to check out my case study on FEAR and goal-oriented action planning, as well as the use of both GOAP and hierarchical task network planning in High Moon Studios' Transformers games. One of the biggest aspects of this release came from how the AI is modelled within the game itself. In Rome Total War, the game AI was mashed within the logic of the game, meaning it was part of the game and could potentially be capable of doing things that players could not or have access to information it shouldn't. In this and future installments, the campaign AI is now separated such that it now actively plays the game like a human does, with interface hooks in the code base that allow for it to talk to the game and vice versa. The campaign AI is driven by considering three key questions. How well am I doing right now? What can I do next? And what resources can I allocate to that? These three questions allow for the use of a Belief Desire Intention or BDI system, meaning that the campaign AI models a set of beliefs, desires and intentions that drive its decision-making process. Beliefs give an understanding of the world to the AI player, but with the proviso that they might not actually be true. These include things such as where enemy resources are, or your relation with another faction. The desires represent the motivational drive of the player and will set the goals of what the system wants to achieve, both immediate and long-term. This can include things such as capturing or defending territory, stopping enemy agents, recruiting armies, prioritising construction, or conducting diplomacy with neighbouring factions. This last one is super complicated. I'm going to come back and talk about it in more detail in a future video. Lastly, the intentions represent the deliberate state of the agent, meaning once it is chosen to do something, these intentions are set for it to continue to achieve, even if it gets sidetracked prior to completing them. This works within a planning-based system, given it can continue to monitor unresolved goals and try and work towards them while planning to resolve immediate concerns. However, as will be discussed in part 3 of this series, the system was incapable of considering many of the overlaps that occur within some of these actions and the conflicts they create in the system's own internal decision-making, leading to another campaign AI upgrade a few years later. In combat, the AI systems carry a number of goals that allow them to be more effective in not only completing their mission, but looking after their own resources. So while an active combat goal may be to attack a given unit up ahead, it may also have a goal to ensure its right flanks is secured given the position of the opposing force. These two goals would be rebalanced and prioritised depending on what was happening in the game at that time, with the current size and positioning of its own army, the current actions it's executing, the enemy terrain, and an assessment of the opposing enemy being taken into consideration. While goals looking towards attacking the enemy may change or be removed once completed, the defensive goals would continually shift based on the current situation, and all of these goals are prioritised by the current state of the battlefield. This results in a system that even when a current plan of execution is interrupted, due to shifting priorities, perhaps in a brief effort to defend itself by manoeuvring, or it may need to save its general from a flanking attack, it will ultimately be able to go back to the original goal and resume from where it was, provided it can resolve them. Conversely, if the AI is attacking the player, it won't make reckless decisions, such as breaking its artillery off from the wide flanks in order to attack a different target rather than the main army, especially if it's going to pose a significant threat to the survival of the rest of its forces. Empire Total War was released in February 2009, but sadly to mixed results. At launch, both the campaign and battle AI struggled under the weight of the problems it faced. This isn't terribly surprising. Planning for large-scale problems of this nature is incredibly taxing, and there's only so many possible outcomes or situations that developers can anticipate during the testing phase. As Creative Assembly creative director Mike Simpson stated, this AI is not like any other we've written. It's by far the most complex code edifice I've ever seen in a game. I wrote much of the campaign AI for Shogun and Medieval. Ah, those were the days. And I know that even quite simple static evaluate act AIs with no plans or memory can be complex enough to exhibit chaotic behaviour. We're talking about mathematical butterfly effect style chaos here. It does what it does, and it's not quite what you intended. This can be a good thing. You cull out the bad behaviours and are left with just what is good, and with a simple system that's not too predictable. The Empire AI is way more complicated than any of our previous products. The net result is an AI that plans furiously and brilliantly in the long term, but disagrees with itself chronically and often ends up paralysed by indecision. Creative Assembly attacked this problem consistently for 6 months after launch, patching the AI up until version 1.5 of the game. These improvements were transferred across to 2010's Napoleon Total War, which was in many respects a functionally identical game taking place in a different combat theatre. This was in part due to the fact that the campaign and battle AI teams were constantly going back to fix problems in Empire while Napoleon was in development, hence there were only small changes and improvements in the next release. Meanwhile, the modding for Empire hit something of a stumbling block, given the change of engine. In previous entries, Total War shipped with many of the underlying variables and performance settings as external data and was loaded into the game on startup, making it relatively easy for mod tools to be built that could expose and customize it. While ideal perhaps in the days of Shogun, this was simply unsustainable as the size and scope of each game increased, with larger campaign maps as well as more and more tactical combat affordances. It's been quoted that the increased amount of data combined with expected memory limits of player computers resulted in significant performance bottlenecks prior to launch. As such, much of the data was pre-processed and compiled into the final executable, which denied modders access to a lot of underlying architecture. This didn't stop mods from arising, however, with the ever-popular Darth mod returning once again for Empire, modifying the underlying parameters to tweak the AI into being more resilient, as well as Brand's Empire AI submod, which takes the Darth mod and tweaks it further to reduce some of the more awkward decisions being made in the game. The difficulties in developing these mods eventually led to a greater effort by Creative Assembly to enable modders to access the back end of the later versions of the game, with more ample mod support in Total War Shogun 2, as well as adoption of the Steam Workshop APIs in many subsequent releases. The evolution of war brought many a growing pain alongside it, but in many respects led to a smarter and more engaging experience for players over time. As players have craved greater authenticity and control of this experience, this too has led to the rise of the modding community that is still strong in the Total War franchise to this day across numerous entries in the series. I hope you've enjoyed this second entry in my series on the AI of Total War. In part 3 I'm taking a look at one of the most critical yet controversial games in the series, 2013's Total War Rome 2. A game that brought some groundbreaking AI innovations under the hood and helped redefine the type of AI systems that can appear in AAA video game development.